Las Vegas, August 14th, 1972. The crowd roared as Elvis lifted the mic. But halfway through the song, something no one expected happened. Priscilla stood up, tears streaking her face, and walked toward the exit. The band froze, Elvis stopped singing, and in that silence, the legend himself began to unravel. The night shimmered like gold. August 14, 1972, Las Vegas Hilton showroom. A sea of 2,000 glittering faces reflecting the spotlight that crowned the king of rock and roll. Cameras flashed like lightning inside a storm of applause. On stage, Elvis Presley adjusted his high collar, the white rhinestones catching every burst of light. From the back row to the front, people whispered the same words. He still got it. But not everyone saw perfection. At a small table near the stage, Priscilla Presley sat still, her silver clutch unopened beside a half-melted glass of ice water. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. The orchestra began the familiar swell of "You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin'," and Elvis leaned into the mic, hips steady, voice deep as thunder. Every lyric filled the room. Yet somehow it didn't reach her. A faint tension hovered between them. Elvis's gaze kept drifting toward the front row, finding hers in brief, charged glances. For a moment he forgot the words. He recovered quickly, flashing that signature grin, and the crowd cheered louder, unaware that something beneath the surface had cracked. Backstage earlier that evening, Joe Esposito, Elvis's trusted aide, had handed him a folded note scrawled in lipstick, a name no one was supposed to see. Rumors moved fast in Las Vegas. By the time Priscilla arrived, she already knew. Still, she came, because that's what wives of legends do. Have you ever watched someone you love become a stranger in front of thousands? As the song built to its final chorus, Elvis's voice trembled on the high note. The brass section faltered. Sweat ran down his temple. His jaw tightened. He saw Priscilla look away, not with anger, but with something worse. Quiet disappointment. The applause thundered through the showroom when he finished. Fans surged forward with bouquets, screaming his name. But Elvis didn't bow. He stepped back, eyes locked on the empty table where she had been sitting just seconds ago. The chair slightly turned, a napkin folded neatly on the linen. Did she just leave? Joe's whisper was barely audible through the roar. Elvis said nothing. He set the microphone down, breaking his own rule. Never end a song without a word to the audience. For the first time that night, he walked off stage mid-ovation. The crowd clapped harder, thinking it was part of the act. It wasn't. Behind the curtain, he stopped, breathing hard, the cheers fading into muffled echoes. He glanced at Joe. She saw it, didn't she? Joe didn't answer. Outside, the neon lights of Las Vegas pulsed like a heartbeat. Bright, relentless, merciless. Inside, the king of rock and roll stood in the shadows, realizing that sometimes the loudest sound in the world is the silence after applause. Elvis turned back toward the stage door. The crowd was still calling his name, but so was his guilt. The backstage hallway smelled of leather, sweat, and aftershave, the kind that clung to velvet curtains and broken promises. Minutes before the show, Elvis had been pacing, fingers tapping against the silver rings that glimmered under the dressing room light. Joe Esposito slipped him a folded napkin, the kind used for scribbled notes between sets. Inside, in smudged red lipstick, was one word: Linda. Elvis's smile faded. Joe hesitated. She left it in the front row, he said quietly. Elvis folded the note in half and shoved it into his pocket, trying to steady his breath. But he knew Priscilla would find out. Maybe she already had. Back in the showroom, Priscilla had been calm, too calm, the kind of calm that hides a storm. As the orchestra began the next number, she barely moved. Her hand rested on the table, fingers tracing the condensation ring left by her glass. The lights shimmered on her diamond bracelet, each reflection like a pulse she could no longer control. When Elvis took the stage again, his voice was smoother, louder, desperate. He sang "Can't Help Falling in Love," the song that once played when they shared private moments, the melody that once meant everything. But tonight the words sounded hollow. He glanced at her between verses, searching for the woman who had once smiled from the wings, eyes shining with pride. Now she just stared through him, like a ghost. Have you ever watched someone sing to you, but every note feels like it's meant for someone else? A woman in the crowd screamed, "We love you, Elvis!" He smiled faintly. But Priscilla saw something behind that smile. Guilt. Distance. The slow fade of a man trapped in the legend he built. Halfway through the song, she couldn't take it anymore. She stood up quietly, the chair scraping softly against the carpet. No one noticed at first, but Elvis did. His fingers froze on the mic stand. The band hesitated, eyes darting toward him for a cue. The room pulsed with confusion. He cleared his throat, forcing the words out, voice trembling. Wise men say, only fools rush in. But the line cracked midway. She turned away, one hand pressed to her mouth, trying not to cry. Sometimes, love doesn't end in shouting. It ends in silence. The crowd began to murmur. Joe, standing near the curtain, shifted uneasily. He'd seen fights, rumors, walkouts, but never this. Never during a show, Elvis kept singing. The orchestra, unsure, softened their volume. The song became a whisper. A man singing not to the crowd, but to the empty space she left behind. And then, for just a moment, Priscilla stopped near the exit. She looked back. Their eyes met across the distance. A frozen second under the harsh white lights of Las Vegas. In that stare was everything unspoken. The love, the betrayal, the years lost between fame and reality. She turned again. This time for good. The doors opened, letting in a wash of desert air. The light caught her tear-streaked face before the darkness swallowed her. Elvis's voice dropped to a whisper. The last line escaped his lips like a confession. I can't help falling. He never finished the sentence. The crowd erupted in confusion, unsure if it was art, drama, or heartbreak unfolding in real time. The stage lights dimmed. The conductor lowered his baton. And for the first time that night, the legend looked small beneath his own spotlight. Backstage, Joe muttered to himself. She walked out, man. She really walked out. Elvis didn't answer. He stood motionless, staring into the blur of the crowd as if searching for her shadow. The applause came late, hesitant, awkward, echoing. How do you keep performing when the person you're performing for is gone? The song ended. But Elvis didn't leave the stage. He turned toward the mic again. And what he said next would change everything. The moment Priscilla's heels disappeared through the side doors, time fractured. The brass section hesitated mid-note. The drummer's sticks hovered in the air. 2,000 people sat frozen under gold light. The stage looked like a photograph that had suddenly come alive and then stopped breathing. Elvis stood there, head slightly bowed, microphone trembling in his hand. The spotlight burned against his skin, but his body felt cold. Somewhere in the dark, a fan shouted, "Keep singing!" Another voice whispered, "What happened?" The noise swelled into a strange confusion. Applause mixing with unease, cheers colliding with pity. He blinked twice, then raised his hand. The orchestra quieted. Only the hum of the amplifiers filled the room. A low electric heartbeat. He leaned toward the mic, voice barely a whisper. Let her go. The words weren't meant for the audience. They were for himself. Joe Esposito, watching from the curtain, whispered to a stagehand, "Kill the brass. Just keep the strings." The house lights dimmed. Elvis took a deep breath and tried again. The band began Bridge Over Troubled Water, but the tempo faltered. His tone cracked on the first line, as if his heart refused to cooperate. Still, he sang, not to impress, not to charm, but to survive. The lyrics came out rough, real. The crowd sensed it. A woman in the third row covered her mouth, tears welling up. Have you ever seen a man perform while his soul is breaking right in front of you? At the halfway mark, he stopped singing. Just stopped. The band froze, waiting for a cue. The silence lasted 4 full seconds, an eternity in showtime. Then he spoke softly. Sometimes, The hardest thing a man can do is finish the song, the audience gasped. That one line, recorded on a bootleg mic near the bar, would later echo through fan circles for decades. Elvis looked toward the exit doors again, now closed, the space behind them swallowed by darkness. The reality hit him. The one person he'd wanted to hear these songs the most wasn't there anymore. He turned away from the crowd, shoulders sinking. "Play it out," he murmured to the band. The strings carried the melody without him, a slow, trembling hum that filled every corner of the showroom. Fans rose to their feet, not cheering, just standing, as if witnessing a funeral of something sacred. Joe stepped forward, ready to lead him off stage, but Elvis lifted a hand. "No, one more." He faced the audience again, eyes wet but steady. "Thank you for being here tonight," he said softly. "Hold on to the people who still listen." The crowd went utterly silent. Then, in a wave of compassion, they began to applaud, not for the show, but for the man unraveling under the weight of his own legend. Backstage crew members whispered later that they'd never seen him like that. No showmanship, no flash, just a man stripped bare before 1,000 strangers. When the curtain finally fell, Elvis stayed where he was, still staring at the empty seat where Priscilla had sat, the spotlight fading to blue around him. Can love survive when fame becomes louder than truth? He didn't walk off. He walked back to the mic, eyes closed, and said quietly, "This next one isn't on the set list." The curtain should have closed. The lights should have dimmed, but instead, the crowd remained. 2,000 strangers holding their breath, waiting. For a long moment, nothing happened. The band members exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to pack up or stay ready. Then, from the darkness backstage, a single voice broke through. "Turn the lights down low," Elvis said. Just one spot. The spotlight drifted to center stage, revealing him. No cape, no swagger. Just a man in a soaked jumpsuit, collar undone, eyes red from tears he hadn't planned to shed. The audience fell into complete silence. The room that had moments earlier been roaring now felt like a church. He held his guitar like a confession. "This one's not for the record," he murmured. "This one's for forgiveness." The first soft chords of "Always on My Mind" rippled through the speakers. His voice was lower, fragile, stripped of the grandeur that usually filled the Hilton showroom. Every lyric landed like truth, every word shaking under the weight of regret. In the hallway outside, Priscilla had stopped. She couldn't walk any farther. The sound of that melody, their melody, pulled her back to the wall near the entrance, hidden from sight, but close enough to hear every trembling note. Elvis's voice cracked on the line. "Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should have." The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't move. They just listened, as if afraid to break the spell. Have you ever heard an apology without words? Only music. Inside the showroom, Joe Esposito wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Even the sound engineers stopped fiddling with their dials. For once, everyone there, from fans to staff, felt like witnesses, not spectators. Elvis looked up toward the ceiling lights, eyes glinting with pain. "If I made you feel second best," he whispered, and the microphone caught the faint tremor in his throat. It was the most human he'd ever sounded. Outside the door, Priscilla closed her eyes, tears falling silently. This wasn't the king the world worshipped. This was the man she once held in a quiet Graceland kitchen at midnight, singing softly before anyone knew his name. As he reached the final chorus, his voice faded into a whisper. "You were always on my mind." Then silence. Not a single clap. Not one cheer. The audience simply sat there, breathless, because they understood. The silence became its own kind of ovation. Then, slowly, a lone voice from the back whispered, "Amen." It was followed by another, then another. Soon the entire room rose, not clapping but standing in reverent quiet, some holding hands, others weeping openly. Backstage, Joe whispered, "You want to end it there?" Elvis shook his head. "No. That's where it finally begins." He set the guitar down gently on the stool and walked off stage. The crowd stayed standing even as the lights came up. Someone later said it felt less like a concert and more like a confession shared by thousands. When Elvis reached his dressing room, he found something waiting for him. On the table, next to his scarf and water glass, was a single folded napkin. Inside, it were 2 words written in Priscilla's handwriting. "I heard." He stared at it for a long time. The noise from the showroom still echoed faintly through the walls, a strange mix of applause and prayer. Elvis folded the note and slipped it into his pocket, right next to the lipstick-stained one from earlier. 2 notes, 2 truths. One from the woman who haunted him, one from the one who hurt him. He didn't know which one burned more. He sat down, hands trembling, and whispered, "Guess I finally finished the song. Can a single night of truth erase years of pretending, or does it just make the silence louder afterward?" Hours later, as the stage crew packed up, one of them noticed something on Priscilla's chair, a white scarf folded perfectly. It would never leave his possession again. Morning light crept through the blinds of Elvis's Hilton suite. The city outside still pulsed with neon even at dawn. Gamblers stumbling home, taxis cutting through the heat haze, the desert wind carrying faint echoes of the night before. Inside, silence, only the soft hum of the minibar and the rustle of paper as Elvis unfolded that small napkin again. "I heard." 2 words. They carried more weight than any lyric he'd ever sung. Joe Esposito knocked gently on the door. "You okay, E?" Elvis didn't look up. "They ever stop talking out there?" Joe hesitated. "No, man. Whole hotel's buzzing. You know what they're calling it?" Elvis looked at him. "The forgiveness song. Somebody recorded it from the back table. Tape's already moving through the strip." He leaned back, eyes closed. "Good," he said softly. "Maybe they'll hear what I meant, even if she never does." On the dressing table lay the white scarf Priscilla had left behind. He reached for it, ran it through his fingers. The fabric still smelled faintly of her perfume. Soft, floral, painfully familiar. He placed it over the microphone on his nightstand, the same way he'd draped scarves over fans' hands for years. But this one wasn't for a crowd. It was an apology no one would ever see. Have you ever realized too late that fame can make you deaf to the people who loved you first? A few weeks later, the Hilton mailed him the official attendance figures. 2,048 tickets sold, 1 missing seat. He folded the report and kept it in his Bible. In interviews after the show, reporters asked about the encore. Elvis smiled, avoiding the question. "Some songs don't need explanations," he said. Only Joe knew the truth. That night had carved something permanent into him. Late that year, during rehearsal at Graceland, a sound engineer found the same napkin pressed inside his lyric notebook. Next to it, scribbled in pencil, "Maybe forgiveness is louder than applause." Fans who attended that Vegas show still spoke about it decades later. Bootleg copies of the tape spread quietly among collectors. Some swore you could hear the moment his voice broke. That exact second when the legend fell away and only the man remained. And in the corner of Graceland, years after his passing, that white scarf sat in a glass case beside a brass tag that read, "Las Vegas Hilton, August 14, 1972. Visitors often stop there longer than anywhere else, maybe because it's the only relic that doesn't shimmer. It just rests, like truth, simple and unpolished." Elvis once told a close friend, "That night, I didn't lose her. I lost the man she loved." Is redemption something you earn on stage, or something you live with when the music's over? On the final night of his Vegas run, Elvis placed that same scarf on the microphone stand before walking off, leaving it there, just like she left him. Years passed, but that night in Las Vegas refused to fade. It lived quietly inside the walls of Graceland, in whispers from old stagehands, in yellowing newspaper clippings, in the faint hiss of a bootleg tape passed from hand to hand like a sacred secret. Visitors who walk through the Elvis Presley Museum often pause near a small glass display tucked behind the main exhibit. There's no glittering jumpsuit, no guitar, no gold record, just a folded white scarf and a plaque that reads, Las Vegas, Hilton, 1972, the Forgiveness Song. The recording plays softly on a loop beside it. You can hear the static, the hum of the crowd, the faint quiver in his voice when he says, "Let her go." Most visitors don't speak. They just listen. Some cry quietly, as if eavesdropping on something too human for fame to touch. For Priscilla, that night marked a quiet turning point. In later interviews, when asked about it, she simply said, "Sometimes walking away is the only way to be heard." Her voice carried no bitterness, only a strange peace. Elvis, too, changed after that concert. Those who knew him said he grew softer. He started reading more, praying longer, calling friends he hadn't spoken to in years. He began writing notes he never sent. Small apologies, quiet reflections. The king had learned that the microphone could reach millions, but it could never mend one broken heart. Have you ever realized that the loudest applause can't drown out silence? By 1977, as his health declined, that scarf remained near his bedside. When a journalist once asked him why he kept it, he smiled faintly and said, "Because some songs never end." After his death, Joe Esposito gave the scarf to Graceland, along with a short letter sealed in the same envelope. The letter simply read, "She left in tears. He stayed in love." That's the truest version of the story I know. Fans still gather every August at the Hilton, now renamed the Westgate, lighting candles in the showroom lobby. Some bring old records. Others bring printed photos of that night. A few leave small notes written in red lipstick, tributes to a love story that ended, yet somehow became eternal. Maybe that's why legends never really die, because they teach us that even the greatest voices can break. The recording of Always on My Mind from that show was never officially released, but bootlegs survive, scratchy, raw, beautiful in their imperfection. You can still hear him pause after the last line, as if waiting for an answer that never came. In that pause lies the heart of the story. A man who built an empire from sound, discovering that silence speaks louder than any song. So when people ask what really happened that night, whether Priscilla ever forgave him, the truth is simple. She did, just not in words. She forgave him in the act of walking away, forcing him to face himself, and the world to finally see the man beneath the crown. Because every legend has two endings, the one history writes and the one the heart remembers. Which one do you believe? The screen fades to black. The final sound is not applause, but the quiet click of a tape recorder stopping and the echo of his last line. Hold on to the people who still listen. Some stories don't fade. They hum in the quiet between songs. If this one moved you, share it with someone who still believes in love that doesn't need an audience. Because sometimes the most powerful moments in music aren't the ones we hear, but the ones that make us listen.